Part 1. The slap heard around the diner. Hale's Corner Diner opened at 6 every morning, same as it had for 41 years, and Walter Hale still made the first pot of coffee himself, same as he had every single one of those mornings. He was 78 years old, built like a man who'd spent his youth carrying ammunition crates up Korean hillsides, and his middle age carrying stacked plates through a lunch rush. And he moved through his own diner with the unhurried certainty of a man who had never once needed to raise his voice to be respected in it. The regulars knew him. The cops on the early shift knew him. Half the town had eaten their first pancake, celebrated their first promotion, and cried through their first breakup in one of his cracked vinyl booths. He did not know, that Tuesday morning, that his diner sat on the single most valuable, most contested piece of real estate in the entire county, a fact that a man named Preston Cole Sr. had been quietly, patiently working to solve for the better part of 2 years. He also did not know that the young man currently seated at booth 4, tapping his phone with visible irritation, was that same man's only son. "This isn't what I ordered," Preston Cole Jr. said, when Walt came by to check on him, gesturing at a plate of eggs over easy instead of the scrambled he'd apparently asked for. He said it the way certain men say most things, not really a complaint, more a performance of one designed for an audience that hadn't yet arrived. "I'll get that fixed right up," Walt said, easy, unbothered, the same tone he'd used on 10,000 minor mix-ups over 4 decades. "Won't be but 2 minutes. 2 minutes I don't have." Preston Jr. stood, chair scraping loud against the floor, and something in the diner's easy morning rhythm paused, the way a room does right before it senses trouble arriving. "You know what? Forget it. This whole place is a joke. My father could buy this dump and bulldoze it before your eggs even finish cooking. That's so." Walt didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, simply reached for the plate to take it back himself. "Well, until he does, I expect I'll keep making eggs." What happened next took less than 4 seconds, though everyone in that diner would describe it afterward as though it had unfolded in painful slow motion. Preston Jr.'s hand cracking across the old man's face, hard enough to knock him half a step sideways into the counter, the plate of eggs over easy shattering against the linoleum, and a silence dropping over the room, so complete you could hear the coffee pot still gurgling in the kitchen. Nobody moved for 1 full second. Then 3 phones came up at once. "You don't talk to me like I'm nobody," Preston Jr. said, breathing hard, some part of him already looking rattled by what his own hand had just done, though not rattled enough to apologize for it. "You have no idea who my family is." Walt straightened slowly, one hand against the counter, the mark on his cheek already reddening, and looked at the younger man with an expression that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with a very old, very tired kind of disappointment. "Son," he said, quiet enough that the whole diner had to lean in to hear it, "I've met men who mattered a great deal more than you, in places a great deal worse than this, and not one of them ever needed to hit an old man to prove it." Preston Jr. left without paying, without apologizing, and without noticing that at least 2 of those raised phones belonged to regulars who'd been coming to Hale's Corner Diner since before he was born. By that evening, a 30-second clip of the slap had been shared several thousand times under a caption that simply read local business owner assaulted for a mixed-up breakfast order, and by the next morning, every version of it had been quietly, mysteriously scrubbed from every platform it had appeared on, as though someone with considerable resources had made a series of very well-placed phone calls overnight. Walt didn't think much of the video disappearing. He assumed it was simply the internet doing what the internet did, moving on, forgetting, burying yesterday's outrage under today's. He iced his cheek, opened the diner at 6 the next morning same as always, and told the handful of concerned regulars who asked that he was fine, truly, no need to make a fuss over an old man and a bad morning. What he didn't know, what he had no reason yet to suspect, was that 300 miles away, in a federal building with a badge clipped to her belt and a corruption task force she'd spent 18 months quietly building a case around, his daughter Dana had just received a text from her niece with a video attached and 4 words that would end, within days, with her booking a flight home for the first time in over a year. "Dad got hit. Watch this." She watched it twice, jaw tightening on the second pass, and then pulled up a name on her own case files that she had not expected to see cross paths with her father's quiet diner on a quiet corner of a town she'd left 20 years ago. a name attached to a growing folder of suspicious zoning approvals, shell companies, and one increasingly interesting stretch of undervalued real estate that a man named Preston Cole Sr. seemed determined, by whatever means necessary, to finally get his hands on. Dana closed her laptop, picked up her phone, and called her partner. Nadia, she said, I need to take some personal time, and I need you to pull everything we have on Cole Sr.'s real estate holdings in Millbrook County, starting with one specific corner lot. No tools are needed, and I'll keep the style consistent with your Chapter 1. Grounded, cinematic, quiet but tense, character-driven, with corruption simmering under small-town routine. Dana Hale had been in the air for 40 minutes before her father even finished wiping down the counter from a morning rush. She didn't tell him she was coming, not yet. She knew him well enough to know he'd tell her not to bother, that he was fine, that she had more important things to do than fly across 3 states because some spoiled rich kid had the emotional stability of wet cardboard. But she also knew the look in his eyes when he said he was fine. And she had seen that look in the 30-second video twice now. The plane hummed beneath her, a low vibration that matched the tight coil in her chest. She kept replaying the moment, the slap, the stagger, the way Walt steadied himself like a man who'd been hit harder in his life and survived worse. He didn't look afraid. He looked disappointed, and that was somehow worse. She closed her eyes, breathed once, and opened her laptop again. The file was already waiting. Cole, Preston, SR, real estate/zoning irregularities. She clicked it open. A map of Millbrook County lit up her screen, dotted with red pins marking parcels of land that had changed hands under suspicious circumstances. Shell companies, inflated valuations, zoning approvals pushed through in meetings that had no public record. And right in the center of it all, like a quiet heartbeat, sat a small square labeled Hale's Corner Diner, owner, Walter Hale. She stared at it for a long moment. Her father had never mentioned anything about the land being valuable. He probably didn't know. He'd bought the place in 1985 for $42,000 and had never once thought about selling it. The diner wasn't an investment. It was a life, and someone wanted it badly enough to send their son in to provoke a reaction. Dana's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a slap. This was pressure, and she was going to find out why. Walt Hale didn't like making a fuss. He didn't like paperwork, didn't like attention, and didn't like the idea of being the center of anything. So, when he walked into the Millbrook Police Department that afternoon, he did it the same way he did everything, quietly, politely, with his hat in his hands and a bruise blooming purple along his cheekbone. Chief Raymond Doyle saw him before the receptionist did. Walt, Doyle said, stepping out of his office with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Heard you had a rough morning. Walt nodded once. Just need to file a report. Doyle's smile thinned. About the incident, about the assault, Walt corrected, voice calm but firm. Doyle gestured toward his office. Come on in. Let's talk. Walt followed him inside, lowering himself into the chair across from the chief's desk. Doyle shut the door behind them. Now, Walt, Doyle began, settling into his seat, you and I both know this town. Things get blown out of proportion. Folks get heated. That boy didn't mean. He hit me, Walt said simply. Doyle exhaled through his nose. And I'm sorry for that. Truly. But filing a formal complaint? That's a whole process. Lawyers' statements, court dates. You don't need that kind of stress. Walt looked at him for a long moment. Ray, he said quietly, I've known you 30 years. I'm not here for stress. I'm here because a man hit me in my own diner. That's all. Doyle's jaw flexed. Walt, the Cole family is involved. You understand what that means. I understand what it doesn't mean, Walt replied. It doesn't mean they get to hit people. July 23rd, 2026, 15:02. Doyle leaned back, fingers steepled. Let me handle this informally. I'll talk to Preston Jr. myself. Make sure he apologizes. Make sure it doesn't happen again. Walt shook his head. I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for a report. Doyle's smile vanished entirely. I can't file it, he said, finally. Walt blinked. Can't. Won't, Doyle corrected. For your sake. Walt stood slowly, hat in hand. Ray, I think you're doing this for someone's sake, but it isn't mine. He walked out without another word. Doyle watched him go, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then dialed. It's me, he said when the line picked up. We have a problem. Dana landed just after sunset, the sky streaked orange and violet over the small regional airport. She stepped off the plane with her badge tucked away, her jacket slung over her shoulder, and her mind already 3 steps ahead. Her phone buzzed. A message from Nadia. Pulled everything on Cole Sr. You're not going to like it. Call when you land. Dana typed back. Landed. Heading to my father's. Send me the zoning files. She rented a car, a beat-up sedan that smelled faintly of pine air freshener, and drove the familiar road toward town. She hadn't been back in over a year, but nothing had changed. The same gas station. The same billboard advertising the county fair. The same quiet streets. She turned onto Hale's corner. The diner lights were off. Walt never closed early. Dana parked, stepped out, and approached the door. A handwritten sign hung in the window. Closed for the evening. Back tomorrow. She unlocked the door with the spare key her father had given her 20 years ago and stepped inside. The diner was spotless. Counters wiped. Chairs stacked. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. She walked behind the counter. A small ice pack sat on the prep table. Her father's handwriting was on a note beside it. Dana, if you see this, don't worry. I'm fine. Just tired. Dad. She closed her eyes. He wasn't fine. She turned as the door opened behind her. Walt stood there, surprised, tired, and older than she remembered. Dana, he said softly. She crossed the room in 3 steps and hugged him, careful but firm. You should have called me, she said. He chuckled once. Didn't want to make a fuss. She pulled back, looked at the bruise on his cheek, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Dad, she said, voice low, this isn't just a slap. This is connected to something bigger. I need you to tell me everything. Walt hesitated. Then he nodded, and the quiet war that had been brewing under Millbrook County for years finally began to surface. If you want, Fan, I can continue with part 3 immediately. Same length, same tone, same pacing, or I can outline the next beats before writing. Just tell me whether you want the next chapter, a longer continuation, or a full structured arc. Dana had always thought of Millbrook County as a place that existed in a different timeline than the rest of the world, slower, quieter, untouched by the kind of corruption she spent her career hunting. But as she sat across from her father in the dimly lit diner, listening to him recount his visit to the police station, she realized how wrong she'd been. Walt spoke plainly, the way he always did. No embellishment, no dramatics, just the facts. Ray Doyle wouldn't file it, he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Said it'd cause trouble. Said he'd handle it informally. Dana leaned back, arms crossed. He's protecting someone. Walt didn't answer. He didn't need to. She already knew. The Cole family had their hands in everything: zoning boards, council seats, business associations, charity galas that were less charity and more laundering. Her task force had been circling them for months, waiting for a mistake big enough to crack the shell. Preston Jr. had just given them one. Dana stood, walked to the counter, and stared at the empty coffee pot her father always kept full. It felt symbolic, a place built on routine suddenly knocked off its axis. Dad, she said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Walt looked up, brow furrowed. Always am. Has anyone ever tried to buy this place before? He hesitated. It was small, barely a pause, but she caught it. Dad. Walt sighed, leaning back in his chair. Couple of times. Folks came by over the years. Developers. Realtors. Said the land was worth more than the building. I told him no. When was the last time? 6 months ago, he said. Man in a suit. Didn't give his name. Said he represented interested parties. Offered me a number that didn't make sense. How high? High enough I knew something was wrong. Dana's pulse quickened. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged. Didn't think it mattered. I wasn't selling. She sat down again, leaning forward. It matters now. Walt looked at her, eyes tired but steady. Dana, I don't want you getting mixed up in this. It's just a diner. No, she said, voice firm. It's a piece of land someone is willing to break the law to get. And that means it's not just a diner. It's leverage. Walt didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them like humidity. Dana pulled out her phone and opened the zoning map again. The red pins glowed like warning lights. Her father's diner wasn't just in the middle of the map. It was the keystone, the one parcel that connected 3 others into a perfect rectangle, the kind developers drooled over, the kind corrupt men built empires on. She zoomed in. Cole Sr., proposed development, Millbrook commercial expansion project, a project worth hundreds of millions, a project that couldn't happen without Walt's corner. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't random. This wasn't personal. This was strategic. And her father had just become a target in a game he didn't even know he was playing. The next morning, Dana drove to the Millbrook Police Department. She didn't wear her badge openly, not yet. She wanted to see how they behaved when they thought she was just another citizen. The receptionist looked up as she entered. Morning. Can I help you? I'm here to follow up on an assault report, Dana said. The receptionist frowned. What assault report? Dana's jaw tightened. The one filed yesterday. The woman checked her computer, typing slowly. I'm not seeing anything. Who filed it? Walter Hale. The receptionist blinked. Oh, Chief Doyle handled that personally. Did he file it? I don't know. Dana nodded once. That was all she needed. She walked past the desk, ignoring the receptionist calling after her, and headed straight for the chief's office. She didn't knock. She opened the door. Chief Doyle looked up from his desk, startled. Can I help you? Dana shut the door behind her. You didn't file my father's report. Doyle's expression tightened. Ms. Hale, I don't know what you think. She pulled her badge from her jacket and set it on his desk. U.S. Marshal. Doyle's face drained of color. I know exactly what you're doing, Dana said. And I know who you're doing it for. Doyle swallowed hard. I was trying to protect your father. No, she said. You were trying to protect Preston Cole Sr. He didn't answer. Dana stepped closer. You're going to tell me everything. Every payment. Every favor. Every call. Because if you don't, I will drag you into federal court myself. Doyle's hands trembled. I can't, he whispered. You can, she said. And you will. He looked at her, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Cole Sr. has people everywhere, he said. Counsel, judges, business owners. If I go against High, you're already against him, Dana said. You just don't realize it yet. Doyle exhaled shakily, rubbing his forehead. He told me to bury it. Said the boy was acting out. Said it would be bad for the town if it got out. And you listened. I didn't have a choice. Dana leaned in, voice low. You always have a choice. You just picked the wrong one. Doyle looked at her badge again, as if it were a weapon. What happens now, he asked. That depends on you, Dana said. You can cooperate, or you can obstruct a federal investigation. One of those ends with you keeping your job, the other ends with you in handcuffs. Doyle closed his eyes. I'll talk, he whispered. Dana nodded once. Good. That afternoon, she met her partner Nadia in a rented conference room at the Millbrook Public Library, neutral ground, quiet, no eyes watching. Nadia spread out the files across the table. You were right, she said. Cole Sr. has been building toward this land for years. He's funneled money through 6 shell companies, bought off 3 council members, and the zoning board completely compromised. Dana scanned the documents, her jaw tightening. And the diner? Nadia tapped a page. The last piece. Without it, the project collapses. Dana exhaled slowly. So, the slap wasn't just a tantrum. No, Nadia said. It was pressure. They wanted your father rattled. Vulnerable. Willing to sell. Dana felt something cold settle in her chest. They don't know my father, she said. Nadia smirked. They're about to. Dana looked out the window at the quiet street, the same one she'd walked as a teenager. She'd left this town to escape smallness, to chase justice somewhere bigger. Now, justice had followed her home. And she wasn't leaving until she finished what someone else had started. Fan, if you want, I can continue immediately with. 30 years ago, Millbrook County was a different place, louder in its corruption and quieter in its resistance, a town where power moved through backrooms and signatures were bought as easily as favors, and Walter Hale was a man who believed that honesty was not a virtue but a duty, something carried like a pack on his shoulders from the army to civilian life, something he never once put down even when it cost him comfort or safety. He was 48 then, strong-backed and steady-eyed, working mornings at the diner and evenings at the county warehouse, a job that required trust, precision, and the kind of integrity that made other men nervous because they could not bend him the way they bent everyone else. That IT was in that warehouse, under flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of dust and cold metal, that Walt first saw the Cole family's shadow stretching across the town in ways most people never noticed until it was too late. Preston Cole Sr. was young then, ambitious, hungry for influence, and determined to build a legacy that would eclipse the one his father had failed to secure, a legacy built not on community, but on control, not on service, but on ownership, and he believed the fastest way to achieve that was through a massive industrial expansion project that required one final piece of land owned by an elderly veteran who refused to sell, a man Walt respected deeply because he had the same quiet backbone Walt carried in his own posture. The project was supposed to be the Cole family's first great victory, the moment they cemented themselves as the future of Millbrook County. But Walt saw something in the paperwork that didn't make sense, numbers that didn't match, crates arriving at the warehouse that weren't listed on any manifest, codes he had never seen before, and two men unloading them with the kind of nervous energy that told him they were doing something they shouldn't be doing. Walt confronted them, calm but firm, and their excuses fell apart faster than their confidence, revealing a laundering scheme tied directly to the expansion project, a scheme that would have funneled money through the county under the guise of development, a scheme that required silence from everyone involved. Walt did not stay silent. He filed a report. He testified at the county hearing. He stood in front of a room full of powerful men and said the truth out loud, a truth that shattered the project, humiliated the Cole patriarch, and forced him to resign in a public meeting that still lived in the town's memory, like a bruise that never fully faded. Walt never thought about it again. He went back to the diner, back to his routines, back to the life he had always lived, believing that honesty had done what it was supposed to do, and that the matter was closed. But Preston Cole Sr. did not forget that he carried the humiliation like a stone in his chest, a weight that hardened into resentment, then into obsession, then into a long, quiet grudge that shaped every decision he made for the next 3 decades. He built his empire slowly, carefully, buying land through shell companies, bribing zoning officials, placing allies in council seats, and every time he expanded his reach, he looked at one corner lot he could not touch, one piece of land owned by the man who had ruined his father's legacy. Hale's Corner Diner. Walt never knew the land was valuable, never knew it was the keystone in a development plan worth hundreds of millions, never knew that Cole Sr. July 23rd, 2026, 1535, had spent years circling it like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike, but Dana Hale knew now. She sat in her hotel room, the zoning map glowing on her laptop, the red pins forming a pattern that made her stomach tighten, and she realized that her father had not just been slapped by a spoiled rich kid. He had been targeted, he had been marked, he had been pushed in a way that was not random, not emotional, not impulsive, but strategic, calculated, and deeply personal. Dana remembered being 15, standing in the back of the county hall while her father testified, watching him speak with the calm certainty of a man who had nothing to hide and nothing to fear, watching the Cole family glare at him with the kind of hatred that could survive generations. She hadn't understood it then, she understood it now. Her father had been living under the shadow of a grudge he never knew existed, a grudge that had finally resurfaced in the form of a slap, a threat, and a pressure campaign designed to break him or force him out. Dana stood from the hotel desk, her pulse steady, her mind sharp, her purpose crystallizing like ice. She picked up her badge, she picked up her phone. She called Nadia. "We have a motive," she said, "and it goes back 30 years. Nadia listened as Dana explained everything: the warehouse, the hearing, the collapse of the project, the humiliation of the coal patriarch, the grudge carried like inheritance, the land that had become a symbol of unfinished vengeance. When Dana finished, Nadia exhaled slowly. "So, Cole Sr. isn't just building a project," she said. "He's settling a score." "Exactly," Dana replied. "And your father's diner is the last piece." "Not just the last piece," Dana said. "It's the piece he couldn't get 30 years ago, the one he's been trying to take from my family for half my life." Nadia was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of it. "Dana," she said finally, "this isn't just corruption, this is retaliation." Dana felt the truth settle into her bones. "Yes, and if your father doesn't sell, he won't. Cole Sr. will push harder." Dana's voice was steel. "Then we push back." She hung up the phone and looked out the window at the quiet street below, the lamps casting long shadows across the pavement, the town unchanged in its appearance but shifting beneath the surface in ways most people would never see. She thought of her father closing the diner early, the bruise on his cheek, the way he said he was fine when she could see the weight he was carrying. She thought of Cole Sr. sitting in his glass office, mistaking quiet for weakness. She thought of Preston Jr., whose hand had cracked across her father's face with the entitlement of a man who believed nothing could touch him. She thought of Chief Doyle, trembling in his office, terrified of the strings being pulled around him. And she thought of herself. BY 7:30 Friday morning, Chief Raymond Doyle was already on his second pack of cigarettes and his third cup of stale station coffee. His office on the top floor of the Millbrook Municipal Building overlooked the main thoroughfare, but for the past 2 days, he hadn't spent much time looking out the window. He spent it staring at his phone, waiting for calls that didn't come, and ignoring emails from local reporters asking why no arrest warrant had been issued for Preston Cole Jr. Doyle was 54, thick around the middle, with 30 years on the force and a pension he had spent 2 decades protecting at all costs. But 3 years ago, a bad real estate investment and a gambling debt in Atlantic City had made him vulnerable. Preston Cole Sr. had stepped in quietly, taking care of the debt, through a maze of shell companies. In exchange, Doyle became a silent partner in the municipal machine, burying code violations, stalling unwanted police reports, and ensuring Cole Sr.'s competitors met endless bureaucratic friction. When Walt Hale had walked into the station 48 hours ago to file an assault report against young Preston, Doyle had handled it personally. He'd taken the old man into his private office, offered him a bottle of water, patted his shoulder, and assured him that these things take time to investigate properly. Then, as soon as Walt walked out the double-glass doors, Doyle had taken the preliminary report, walked it over to the shredder beside his desk, and dropped it in. He thought he had bought his benefactor time. He didn't know that 3 miles away, inside a darkened mobile command van parked in an empty strip mall lot, Federal Task Force partner Nadia Reyes was staring at a high-resolution dual-monitor setup, scrolling through bank records subpoenaed 6 hours earlier. "Got it," Nadia said, leaning back in her swivel chair and taking a sip of black tea. She flagged a row on her screen in bright yellow. Dana Hale stood behind her, arms crossed, watching the data stream. "What are we looking at?" He slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera. Part 6 page, one of 3, First Heritage Mutual's local agent isn't the only one getting side payments, Nadia explained, pointing her pen at the monitor. "Look at this wire transfer path. Every quarter for the last 24 months, a shell entity called Apex Crest Consulting LLC transfers exactly $12,000 into an offshore account held in Nevis. 3 days later, equal cashier's checks are drawn from a regional bank branch in neighboring Fairview County and deposited directly into a mortgage account registered to one Raymond P. Doyle." Dana's eyes hardened. Chief Doyle's home mortgage. "Paid down by 60% in 2 years, Nadia confirmed. "And here's the kicker. Apex Crest Consulting isn't just funding Doyle. Apex Crest is 80% owned by a holding company whose primary registered agent is Preston Cole Sr.'s personal corporate attorney. Dana let out a quiet, dangerous breath. A sitting police chief on a direct recurring retainer from a developer seeking municipal land acquisitions. That's not just bribery, Nadia. That's a textbook pattern of racketeering under federal RICO statutes. And because Doyle buried your dad's assault report on Wednesday, Nadia added, snapping her laptop screen slightly closer, he committed an overt act to conceal an ongoing criminal enterprise using interstate communications. Across town at Millbrook Station, Chief Doyle's intercom buzzed sharp and sudden. He jumped, spilling coffee onto his blotter. "What is it?" he barked into the speaker. "Chief, you have a caller on line 2, his assistant said, her voice sounding unnaturally hesitant. "She says she's Deputy Chief U.S. Marshal Dana Hale. She says it's regarding an administrative inquiry into shredded incident filings from Wednesday morning." Doyle went completely still. The color drained from his face so fast he felt a cold sweat break out along his collar. Dana Hale. He remembered her. Walt Hale's kid, the quiet girl who used to study at the back booth of the diner 20 years ago before going off to law school. He hadn't thought about her in years. He assumed she was just another bureaucrat working somewhere down south. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Doyle picked up the receiver. "Chief Doyle," he said, forcing his voice into a stern, authoritative posture. "Raymond." Dana's voice came through the line, crystal clear, unhurried, and deadly calm. "I'm sitting in a vehicle 3 minutes from your station. My task force has spent the last 6 hours reviewing wire records from Apex Crest Consulting." Doyle felt his breath lock in his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. Dana, if this is about your father's minor dispute at the diner," he slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera. Part 6, page 2 of 3. "It's not about the dispute, Raymond." Dana interrupted smoothly. "It's about the paper shredder beside your desk. It's about your mortgage in Fairview County. And it's about the grand jury subpoena that is being delivered to your municipal clerk as we speak." Doyle stood up, so fast his heavy leather chair slammed hard into the wall behind him. "Dana, listen to me. You're making a massive mistake. You don't understand how things work in this county." "I understand exactly how they work," Dana said, her tone as cold as winter iron. "Which is why you have about 10 minutes to decide whether you're going to be a co-defendant on a federal indictment or whether you're going to give me everything you have on Preston Cole Sr. before my team knocks on your door." The line went dead. Chief Doyle stood alone in his office, receiver clutched in his shaking hand, staring at the shredder in the corner as the sirens of 2 unmarked federal sedans began to echo from 3 blocks away. Took Chief Raymond Doyle less than 4 minutes to break. When Deputy Chief U.S. Marshal Dana Hale and her team stepped into his office, the chief was sitting behind his desk with his arms resting flat on the blotter, his badge and department sidearm already unclipped and placed neatly beside his coffee cup. He didn't ask for a lawyer. Instead, he opened the top drawer of his desk, pulled out an encrypted thumb drive, and slid it across the wood. "Every phone call Preston Cole Sr. made to my personal cell over the last 18 months, Doyle muttered, his eyes fixed on the floor. "He thought I was keeping them for my own insurance. Audio files, text messages, lists of municipal zoning board members receiving cash envelopes. It's all in there." By 2 o'clock that afternoon, federal judges in 2 jurisdictions had signed emergency arrest warrants and search orders for every physical and digital asset linked to Cole Enterprises. The hammer was ready to fall, and Dana Hale intended to strike it herself. At the glass and steel headquarters of Cole Enterprises on Grand Avenue, Preston Cole Sr. was sitting at his corner desk, pouring himself a double scotch. He had spent the morning trying to reach Chief Doyle, only to have his calls route straight to an automated voicemail system. His legal counsel had assured him that the viral diner video was just a temporary public relations bump, something that could be smoothed over with a generous donation to a local youth program and a quiet civil settlement. Cole Sr. had believed him until the glass double doors of his executive suite burst open. 8 armed federal agents in tactical vests bearing U.S. Marshal and FBI in stark yellow lettering filled the room. Leading the team was Dana Hale, dressed in a sharp dark suit with her brass federal shield clipped to her lapel. Cole Sr. stood up, his Scotch glass frozen halfway to his lips, his face flushing dark red. "What is the meaning of this intrusion? Do you know who I am?" "I know the state Attorney General." "I know, Preston Cole Sr.," Dana said, her voice cutting through his outburst like a razor blade. "You are under arrest pursuant to a federal warrant issued by the United States District." He slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera. Part 7 page, 1 of 2 court. The charges include racketeering under the RICO Act, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bribery of municipal officials, and witness intimidation. Before Cole Sr. could digest the words, 2 federal agents moved behind him, pulled his arms behind his back, and snapped steel handcuffs around his wrists. The glass of scotch slipped from his hand, shattering across the imported Italian marble floor. "This is absurd," Cole Sr. shouted, his voice cracking as he was forced down onto his desk chair. "Call my attorney." "Where is my son?" "Your son is currently being taken into custody at his gated estate," Nadia Reyes said, stepping into the room with 2 forensic IT specialists carrying evidence bags. "And unlike you, Preston Jr. is also facing state felony assault charges, extortion, and hate crime enhancements stemming from Wednesday's video." 10 miles away, in the manicured driveway of his father's 5-acre estate, Preston Cole Jr. was stepping out of his luxury sports car when 3 unmarked SUV units blocked his path. Before the young man could react or utter a word of his usual arrogant threats, agents forced him down onto the gravel, pinning his arms and clicking the cuffs in place. "Hey, do you know who my dad is?" Preston Jr. screamed, his face pressed against the sharp gravel driveway, his expensive designer jacket tearing at the elbows. "He'll destroy every single one of you. My dad owns this entire town." A federal agent leaned down, pulling Preston Jr. up to his feet. "Your dad is currently sitting in a holding cell at the federal courthouse, kid. He couldn't even buy you a parking ticket right now." Back at the diner on Main Street, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the newly polished vinyl booths. Walt Hale sat at his usual corner table, holding a fresh cup of dark roast coffee. Outside, local TV news vans were parked down the block, broadcasting live reports as federal agents seized Cole Enterprises trucks and posted government seizure notices on the developer's properties. The front door chimed and Dana walked in. She had removed her suit jacket, her badge tucked away, leaving only the quiet strength that her father had recognized since she was a little girl. She walked over, pulled out a chair across from Walt, and sat down. Walt looked at his daughter, his eyes soft with a mixture of immense pride and deep relief. "Is it over, sweetheart?" Walt asked softly. Dana reached across the table, covering her father's calloused hand with her own. "It's over, Dad. They'll never touch this place again." 9 months after federal agents raided Cole Enterprises, the high-ceilinged courtroom of the U.S. District Courthouse was packed to capacity. Journalists, local business owners, and townspeople squeezed into the wooden benches, all eyes focused on the defense table. Preston Cole Sr., stripped of his tailored suits and wearing a dark orange prison jumpsuit, sat beside his team of high-priced defense attorneys. Beside him sat Preston Cole Jr., slouching in his own matching jumpsuit, his previous arrogance entirely evaporated into a hollow, frightened stare. Thanks to Chief Doyle's encrypted thumb drive, financial records uncovered by Nadia Reyes, and overwhelming video evidence, the trial had barely lasted 2 weeks. The jury took less than 3 hours to return guilty verdicts across all counts. Federal RICO conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and felony assault. When Judge Sarah Vance delivered the sentences, her voice echoed sternly through the quiet room. Preston Cole Sr. received 22 years in federal prison without eligibility for parole, alongside the complete asset forfeiture of Cole Enterprises and its shell companies. Preston Cole Jr., despite his lawyer's desperate pleas for leniency, was sentenced to 6 years in state prison for aggravated assault and extortion with mandatory anger management and community restitution. Chief Raymond Doyle, having cooperated fully as a state witness, accepted a plea agreement resulting in a dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of his police pension, and a 4-year sentence in a medium security facility. The municipal corrupt web that had choked Millbrook for over 2 decades had been completely dismantled. Outside, on the courthouse steps, bright morning sunlight washed over the marble plaza. Microphones and news cameras crowded around Deputy Chief U.S. Marshal Dana Hale and her father, Walt Hale. When a reporter pressed his microphone forward and asked how it felt to see the empire that terrorized the town finally fall, Walt paused, adjusting his signature baseball cap. People thought guys like Cole owned this town because they had all the money and political muscle, Walt said, his voice steady and resonant. But a town isn't owned by paper deeds or bribery. It belongs to the people who work hard every morning, who sweep the... He slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera. Part 8 page, one of 2 sidewalks, pour the coffee, and look out for their neighbors. My daughter showed everyone that no matter how powerful you think you are, nobody stands above the law. By late afternoon, life back on Main Street had returned to a sweet, familiar rhythm. The neon sign of the Millbrook Diner buzzed softly in the dusk. Inside, every booth was filled with local regulars, laughing over hot meals and fresh slices of cherry pie. The diner had become more than just a local restaurant. It was now a symbol of resilience for the entire region. Behind the counter, Walt poured a steaming mug of black coffee and walked it over to the corner booth. Dana sat there in comfortable clothes, scrolling through her tablet, while Nadia sat across from her, enjoying a plate of pancakes. "Refill, Agent?" Walt asked with a warm grin, setting the pot down on the table. "Always, Mr. Hale." Nadia smiled, holding up her mug. "Though, I have to tell you, if I stay in Millbrook much longer, I'm going to have to fail my physical readiness test." Walt chuckled softly, tapping his fingers gently against the wooden table. He looked around his diner at the polished stainless steel, the framed photos of town history on the wall, and the customers who felt like extended family. For years, the shadow of Cole Enterprises had hung over his shop like a dark cloud, threatening to tear down 40 years of hard work. Now the sky was clear. Dana reached up, clasping her father's hand. "Task Force is wrapping up the final receivership paperwork next week, Dad. The city is establishing a municipal trust using Cole's forfeited assets to repair the downtown district and support local small businesses." Walt nodded slowly, feeling a deep, profound peace settle over his heart. "They tried to buy the town, and they tried to take my diner. But they forgot one thing." "What's that, Dad?" Dana asked, her eyes shining with warmth. Walt looked at his daughter with a soft smile. "They forgot that around here, family always gets the last word." Any year had passed since the downfall of Cole Enterprises, and the town of Millbrook was virtually unrecognizable from the intimidated community it had once been. Main Street, once marred by boarded-up storefronts and predatory commercial real estate signs, was now vibrant with activity. Where the corporate headquarters of Cole Enterprises once stood, the city had broken ground on the new Millbrook Community Center and Youth Training Institute, funded entirely by the liquidated assets seized during the federal RICO prosecution. On a warm Saturday morning, a stream of colorful banners fluttered in the autumn breeze above the entrance of the Millbrook Diner. Today was no ordinary day. Walt Hale was celebrating his 79th birthday, and the entire town had gathered to honor the man whose quiet courage had sparked the liberation of their community. Inside, the diner was buzzing with laughter and music. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and the counter was lined with flower bouquets sent by local business owners, merchants, and even state officials. Former employees of Cole Enterprises who had once lived in fear of sudden eviction were now proud owners of micro-grants issued by the Municipal Restoration Trust, reopening family bakeries, hardware stores, and tailors across the district. Behind the counter, Walt stood proudly in his crisp white apron, though he wasn't doing the heavy lifting today. Beside him stood Clara, his longtime lead server, whom Walt had officially made co-owner and general manager of the diner earlier that spring. After 45 years of working 70-hour weeks, Walt had finally agreed to step back into an advisory role, spending his mornings chatting with regulars and reading the morning paper without the burden of supply chains or payroll hovering over his head. Near the center table, Deputy Chief U.S. Marshal Dana Hale watched her father with an overwhelming sense of pride. Clad in a simple navy blazer, rather than her tactical gear, she held a warm cup of coffee, enjoying the rare serenity. Sitting across from her was senior analyst Nadia Reyes, who had recently accepted a permanent promotion as Special Assistant Director within the Department of Justice's Anti-Corruption Division in Washington, D.C. "I still get calls from federal prosecutors asking for the template we used in this case," Nadia said softly, setting down her mug. "The Millbrook operation has officially become he slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera." Part 9 page 1 of 2 case study at the Fleck Academy in Glencoe. They call it the Hale Protocol, how federal resources and local grassroots intelligence can dismantle entrenched municipal syndicates without destroying the local economy. Dana smiled gently. "My father wouldn't care much for fancy titles like protocol. He'd just call it doing what's right." Later that afternoon, as the crowd began to clear out and the setting sun cast a golden hue across the glass storefront, Walt tapped his glass with a spoon to call the room to order. The remaining guests, friends, neighbors, and law enforcement officers who had worked on the task force turned their attention toward the counter. "I want to thank everyone for coming out today," Walt began, his voice thick with emotion. "When my late wife and I opened this diner nearly 50 years ago, we didn't set out to build something famous or grand. We just wanted a warm place where working people could get an honest meal and feel respected. When dark times came and people tried to force us out, I thought we were fighting alone. But I was wrong." Walt looked directly at Dana, his eyes welling with gratitude. "Justice isn't just something that happens in courtrooms or in law books. It's built right here, in how we protect each other when someone gets pushed down. I couldn't be prouder of my daughter, not just because she wears a federal badge, but because she never forgot where she came from." The room erupted into applause and warm cheers. Dana walked over and embraced her father tightly. The viral security video that started it all, a powerful man striking an elderly business owner in cold blood, was now a distant memory, replaced by a legacy of strength, integrity, and rebirth. As the stars filled the evening sky over Millbrook, the neon sign of the diner flickered brightly into the night. Millbrook Diner, open always, serving everyone. The town belonged to its people once again, and its future was brighter than ever. Years after the fall of the coal corruption machine, the Glass and Steel Auditorium at the FBI Academy in Quantico was filled with 200 incoming federal trainees. At the lectern stood Deputy Chief U.S. Marshal Dana Hale. Behind her, projected on a massive dual screen, was the contrast that had redefined modern federal task force operations. On the left, the viral security footage of Preston Cole Jr. slapping 78-year-old Walt Hale. On the right, the complex financial web chart that had brought down an entire multi-million-dollar criminal syndicate. Most people look at this case and see a story about revenge, Dana told the silent auditorium, her voice ringing with quiet authority. They see a spoiled heir who picked a fight with the wrong old man, not knowing that man's daughter wore a badge. But if that's all you see, you've missed the entire point of public service and federal law enforcement. She paused, stepping out from behind a podium to address the young agents directly. Preston Cole Sr. built an empire not because he was smarter than everyone else, but because he believed ordinary people were too small, too divided, and too afraid to fight back. He used fear, political bribery, and economic pressure to convince an entire town that his authority was absolute. What brought him down wasn't just federal warrants, it was a community's decision to stop being silent. Dana explained how the key piece of evidence hadn't come from a wiretap or a high-tech satellite, but from Chief Doyle's conscience and a small thumb drive handed over by a terrified municipal worker who realized someone was finally listening. "Your badge doesn't make you superior to the people you serve," she concluded. "It makes you their shield. Never forget that the strongest institution in this country isn't a government agency, it's the trust of everyday citizens who believe in equal justice." Meanwhile, 300 miles north in Millbrook, autumn had settled over the valley. Main Street was thriving with new independent businesses. The Old Coal Enterprises headquarters had officially opened as the town's vibrant vocational training institute, providing job certifications for hundreds of local workers. At the corner of 4th and Main, the Millbrook Diner was busy as ever. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee, fresh cinnamon rolls, and sizzling bacon. Walt Hale, now 80, he slapped a 78-year-old diner owner on camera. Part 10-page, one of 2 years old, walked slowly between the booths carrying a coffee pot. Though Clara now managed daily operations, Walt refused to completely give up his morning rounds. He stopped near the front window, where a young family was enjoying breakfast. The father looked up, smiling warm-heartedly. "Morning, Mr. Hale. Place looks fantastic." "Morning, Tim," Walt replied with a warm twinkle in his eye. "Just keeping the coffee hot and the seats warm." As Walt walked back to the counter, he glanced up at the small framed plaque mounted right beside the register. It contained a copy of the front-page news article from the day the federal court handed down the final convictions, alongside a simple bronze plate engraved with the diner's core philosophy. "A town is built on respect, not power." Outside, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Dana stepped out, wearing a comfortable sweater and holding a small duffel bag. Home for a well-deserved 2-week vacation. As the bell above the diner door jingled, Walt turned around, his face lighting up with an unmistakable warmth. "Hey, there, Deputy," Walt said, setting down the coffee pot. "Hey, Dad," Dana smiled, walking over to wrap her arms around him. "Smells good in here." "It always does," Walt replied softly, looking out the window at the peaceful, thriving street outside. "It always does."